When Sade collapsed in that village market, pregnant and alone, she faced the ultimate consequence of defying her father. But what she didn't know was that Kunle hadn't abandoned her. Something far worse had happened to him. Today's story reveals how traditional expectations can turn loving parents into antagonists, how wealth can become a prison, and how the search for authentic love can lead to unimaginable sacrifice. The truth behind Kunle's disappearance will shock you. Two worlds collide in the most unexpected of places. The marble floors of Lagos' most prestigious art gallery echo with the footsteps of Nigeria's elite. Among them walks Sade Adebayo, daughter of one of the city's wealthiest businessmen. Her Ankara dress, custom-tailored with gold thread accents, catches the light as she moves from piece to piece, champagne flute delicately balanced between manicured fingers. In the far corner stands Kunle Aladil, shifting uncomfortably in his only presentable shirt, patched at the elbow but freshly pressed for the occasion. His paintings hang on the wall behind him, raw, vibrant canvases that seem to pulse with life, compared to the more conventional works dominating the exhibition. This opportunity came through a friend of a friend who pitted his talent, going unnoticed in the backstreets of Mushin. Sade pauses before one of Kunle's paintings. It depicts a bird with brilliant plumage, half emerging from a golden cage, wings spread toward a horizon painted in colors no bird should naturally possess. The gallery buzzes around her, but she stands transfixed. Something in those brushstrokes speaks to her in a language she's never heard but instantly understands. The colors aren't traditional, Kunle says, approaching cautiously. My art teacher said I used too many. Sade turns, surprised not by his presence but by his honesty. I think they're perfect, she replies. This bird, it looks like it's choosing between safety and freedom. Kunle's eyes widen slightly. Most people just see a colorful bird. That exchange marks the beginning. A conversation that should have lasted minutes stretches to an hour, then two. They move from discussing technique to exchanging philosophies, finding unexpected common ground despite standing on opposite sides of Lagos' rigid social divide. Sade learns that Kunle's mother sells provisions from a small shop in Yaba, rising before dawn each day to stock her shelves. His father, a retired secondary school teacher, spends evenings helping neighborhood children with their studies, accepting payment in whatever parents can afford, often just gratitude. When Kunle speaks of his parents, pride radiates from him like heat. My father always says a good name outlasts good money, he tells her. He turned down opportunities that would have made us wealthy because they compromised his principles. In turn, Sade reveals the gilded cage of her existence. The private schools abroad. The endless social obligations. The unspoken expectation that she will eventually marry someone from her father's carefully curated list of acceptable suitors, men chosen for their family connections, political influence, and financial portfolios rather than any quality that might bring her happiness. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, she confesses, surprising herself with her candor. My father sees me as an extension of his legacy, not as a person with my own dreams. As the gallery empties and staff begin meaningful glances in their direction, Sade makes an impulsive decision. She purchases Kunle's painting of the bird, paying the full asking price despite the gallery owner's whispered assurance that for Adebayo's daughter a discount could be arranged. I need to see more of your work, she says, writing her private number on a gallery program. Not the pieces you think will sell. The ones that matter to you. 2 days later, they meet at a small cafe in a neighborhood where neither of them is likely to be recognized. Kunle brings a portfolio of sketches, intimate, powerful works he's never shown at galleries. His fingers, stained with charcoal and paint, brush against hers as he turns each page. The electricity of that simple contact startles them both. What begins as artistic appreciation quickly becomes something deeper. Secret meetings multiply, quiet corners of public libraries, hidden spots in city parks, once even a rooftop where Kunle has been commissioned to paint a mural. Each encounter builds a bridge between their worlds, constructed of shared laughter, whispered confidences, and an understanding that transcends the circumstances of their births. Kunle sees in Sade not the untouchable princess of Lagos high society, but a woman yearning for authenticity in a world built on appearances. Sade discovers in Kunle a man who values her thoughts, her essence, more than her father's connections or bank accounts. One evening, sheltered in the back room of a friend's studio, Kunle gently touches Sade's face, asking permission with his eyes before leaning in to kiss her. In that moment, the last pretense falls away. This is no longer about art appreciation or friendly conversation. This is something that could cost them both everything. My father would never understand this, Sade whispers against his lips. He measures people by their net worth, not their character. Then we'll be careful, Kunle promises, knowing the danger but unable to walk away. Until we figure out a way forward. Their meetings become more secretive, more precious. Sade invents charity committees and shopping excursions to steal hours with Kunle. He works through nights to complete commissions, creating free time during days. They build a private universe between them, furnished with promises and possibilities. But as weeks pass, reality intrudes. Sade's best friend Bimp notices her distraction, the mysterious appointments, the glow that comes from more than expensive skincare. Adebayo mentions with increasing frequency his appreciation for Tunbaker's family connections. The walls seem to be closing in. In Nigerian high society, daughters don't just marry, they merge family empires. When Adebayo discovers his carefully arranged dynasty threatened by an artist from Mushin, his reaction reveals the true price of defiance. Between love and legacy, something valuable must be sacrificed. Sade's phone buzzes with another message from Bimp, "Your father will find out eventually. You're risking everything." She silences it, sliding the phone under her pillow. The warnings have grown more urgent, but so has the pull of her heart. Each meeting with Kunle feels less like rebellion and more like breathing, the only moments when she isn't suffocating under expectations. Meanwhile, in his study lined with photographs of political allies, Adebayo speaks animatedly into his phone. "Yes, Senator Bakare, I believe our families have much to gain from this union." He chuckles, the sound hollow and practiced. "Tund has an excellent future in politics, and my Sade will make a perfect political wife." The marriage he's orchestrating isn't just about tradition, it's a calculated business move. The Bakare family's political connections, combined with Adebayo Enterprises, would create an unstoppable force in Lagos. He's already mentally allocated the dowry funds to secure government contracts that would triple his investment within a year. On a secluded stretch of Tarkwa Bay, far from the crowds and prying eyes, Kunle sets up his easel as the sun begins its descent. The golden light bathes Sade's skin as she sits on the sand, her expensive dress replaced by simple shorts and a t-shirt. "Don't move," Kunle says, his brush dancing across the canvas. "This light makes you look like you belong to another world." "Maybe I do," she whispers. The sound of waves provides a rhythm to his brush strokes. As he paints, Kunle speaks of his dreams, not of wealth or status, but of a small studio where he could teach art to children, a home filled with books and music, walls adorned with memories rather than expensive paintings. "I can't give you what your father can," he admits, looking up from his canvas. "But I can promise that every day you'll be loved for exactly who you are, not who someone wants you to become." Sade watches him, this man who sees beyond her father's daughter to the woman she longs to be. "That's worth more than all the naira in Lagos," she says, reaching for his paint-stained hand. It's the driver who betrays them, reporting to Adebayo after driving Sade to what she claimed was a charity meeting. Instead, he witnessed her rendezvous with some common boy at the beach. Adebayo dismisses the staff early that evening, sitting alone in his study, tumbler of whiskey untouched as he waits for his daughter's return. When Sade enters the house, humming to herself, her father's voice cuts through the silence. "Who is he?" The words fall like stones in still water. Sade freezes, her smile fading. "Papa, do not papa me." Adebayo rises from his chair, his frame imposing despite his impeccable suit. "You've been seen with some nobody from Mushin." "An artist?" He spits the word like it's contaminated. "While I'm arranging your future with the Becares, you're rolling in the sand with a painter?" "His name is Kunle, and I love him." The words escape before she can consider their impact. Adebayo's laugh is bitter. "Love? What do you know of love? This is not love, Sade. This is rebellion. This is you spitting on every sacrifice I've made to give you the life you have." "I never asked for this life," Sade counters, her voice stronger than she feels. "I never asked to be a pawn in your business chess game." His palm slams against the mahogany desk. "You are my daughter. The Adebayo name means something in this country. Do you think I worked this hard, climbed this high, just to watch you throw it all away for some street boy with a paintbrush? He has more integrity in his little finger than all your business associates combined," Sade says, tears streaming now. "Integrity doesn't build empires." Adebayo's voice lowers, dangerous in its calm. "You will end this nonsense. Tomorrow, you will call this boy and finish it. Then you will meet with Tun's mother to discuss wedding arrangements." For the first time in her 23 years, Sade looks directly into her father's eyes and says, "No." The silence that follows is deafening. Adebayo studies his daughter, his expression shifting from rage to something more calculated. A muscle twitches in his jaw as he reassesses the situation like the businessman he is, identifying the problem, evaluating solutions, considering collateral damage. "Very well," he says finally, his tone eerily composed. "If you insist on destroying yourself, I cannot stop you. But remember this, an Adebayo never threatens without follow-through. Choose this path, and there will be consequences." In that moment, Sade sees something in her father she's never witnessed before, not just anger or disappointment, but the cold, ruthless calculation of a man who eliminates obstacles without remorse. She realizes with a chill that in her father's eyes, she has transformed from beloved daughter to business liability in the space of a single conversation. Behind closed doors, powerful men make problems disappear, not with shouting or threats, but with whispered conversations and handshakes. The night after Sade's confrontation with her father, Adebayo summoned his driver to take him to the Becare estate on Victoria Island. The security guards recognized his Mercedes immediately, opening the gates without question despite the late hour. Tun's father, Senator Becare, was waiting in his private study. The room smelled of expensive cigar smoke and aged whiskey. 2 glasses were already poured when Adebayo entered. The men exchanged pleasantries, but both knew this meeting had only one purpose. "My daughter has become difficult," Adebayo said finally, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "There's a boy." "Nobody, really." "An artist from Mushin." Senator Becare nodded slowly. "Young women often go through these phases. A rebellious streak before settling into their responsibilities. This feels different," Adebayo admitted. "She's challenging me directly. Something must be done about this boy before he ruins everything we've planned." The senator leaned forward. "You understand, my son has political aspirations. We cannot afford scandals or complications. This alliance is too important." Their conversation continued in careful euphemisms. Resources would be mobilized. The problem would be handled. No explicit instructions were given, men of their status never left such evidence. By the time Adebayo left, both understood that Kunle Aladil would no longer be an obstacle. That same evening, unaware of the darkness gathering around him, Kunle sat with Sade on the rooftop where they first shared their dreams. The city lights sparkled below them, a tapestry of possibilities. "I've made my decision," Sade said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm choosing you, Kunle. I'll leave everything, the house, the cars, the connections. All of it." Kunle took her hands, his eyes serious. "Are you certain? Your world is all you've known. The comfort, the security." "What security?" she interrupted. "The security of being sold into a loveless marriage? Of living my entire life following someone else's script? That's not security, that's a prison." He pulled her close, whispering against her hair, "I have very little to offer compared to, you offer me freedom," she said. "The freedom to be myself. To love honestly. What greater wealth is there?" They stayed until the moon was high, making plans in hushed voices. Kunle would prepare his small apartment. Sade would gather only what couldn't be replaced, her mother's jewelry, important documents, her sketchbooks. In 3 days, they would leave Lagos together, perhaps head north to Kaduna where his cousin owned a small gallery. When they finally parted, Kunle insisted on walking her to the taxi stand. Their goodbye kiss was lingering, full of promise. Neither knew it would be their last. "I'll call you when I get home," he promised. That call never came. The first hours of Kunle's absence didn't alarm Sade. Poor network connectivity was common in his neighborhood. But when morning arrived with no message, unease crept into her thoughts. She tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. By afternoon, her worry had grown into fear. He wouldn't just disappear, she told herself, pacing her bedroom. Not after last night. Not after our plans. That evening, she risked calling his mother's shop, claiming to be a potential art buyer. The woman's voice was strained, worried. "Kunle didn't come home last night. He's never done this before. I've called everyone." Sade's blood ran cold. Something was terribly wrong. For 2 days, she lived in a state of suspended terror. She called hospitals, checked with mutual acquaintances, even had her driver pass by his neighborhood under the pretense of shopping. Kunle had vanished without a trace. On the 3rd night, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Sade waited until the household was asleep. She changed into jeans and a dark hoodie, stuffed pillows under her bed covers, and slipped out through the garden gate. Her plan was to go to Kunle's neighborhood directly, to knock on doors if necessary. She made it only 3 blocks before a black SUV pulled alongside her. The window lowered to reveal her father's head of security. "Miss Adebayo," he said quietly. "Your father requests your immediate return." "I'm not going back," she said, backing away. 2 men emerged from the vehicle. They didn't grab her, they didn't need to. Their presence alone made it clear she had no choice. The ride home was silent, her mind racing through increasingly desperate scenarios. At the house, Adebayo waited in his study. He didn't look angry, worse, he looked coldly composed. "Where is Kunle?" she demanded immediately. "Sit down, Sade. What have you done?" "I've protected this family, as I always have." His voice was measured, clinical. "Your artist friend is gone. Whether he left willingly or unwillingly is irrelevant. He will not contact you again." Her legs weakened. "If you've hurt him, I've given you everything," Adebayo cut her off. "The best education, every luxury, a position in society others would kill for. And this is how you repay me?" He stood, hands flat on his desk. "You have 2 choices. Marry Tunbakir as arranged, or leave this house with nothing but the clothes on your back. No money, no connections, no Adebayo name to protect you." Sade stared at her father, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. This man who had raised her, who had once carried her on his shoulders, was capable of erasing a human being simply because they threatened his plans. What does it cost to choose love over legacy? For Sade, the price was everything familiar: her childhood home, financial security, family connections. Yet as she counted the few naira notes in her pocket at the bus station, she felt something she hadn't experienced in her father's mansion: freedom. The sting of her father's palm against her cheek lingered long after the physical pain had faded. The family dinner had turned into a tribunal, with Adebayo demanding her final answer about Tunbakere. When she refused once more, his hand flew across the table. The silence that followed was deafening, aunties averting their eyes, cousins frozen mid-bite, her uncle studying the tablecloth. No one defended her. In that moment, Sade understood that family loyalty had its limits. That night, the household slept while Sade moved like a ghost through her bedroom. She packed methodically, practical clothes rather than designer labels, a small photo album, her sketchbook. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the jade pendant her grandmother had given her before passing. For strength, the old woman had whispered. Sade needed that strength now more than ever. The security guard at the back gate was surprised to see her at 3 a.m. but asked no questions when she mentioned an early morning appointment. The Adebayo name still opened doors, even when she was walking away from it. The irony wasn't lost on her as she slipped into the pre-dawn darkness, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would wake the neighborhood. By sunrise, Sade found herself at Jibowa Bus Park, clutching her duffel bag. The crowded, chaotic terminal was a world she'd only glimpsed through tinted car windows. Now she stood in the midst of it, hawkers shouting prices, drivers arguing over passengers, the air thick with diesel fumes and desperation. She approached the ticket counter with uncertainty, aware of curious glances. Her accent and demeanor marked her as an outsider. "Where to?" asked the ticket seller, not looking up from his ledger. Sade hesitated. She hadn't thought this far ahead. "Somewhere far from Lagos," she finally said. An older woman in line behind her stepped forward. "Child, you look lost," she said, her eyes kind but penetrating. No one leaves without knowing where they're going unless they're running from something. Sade couldn't meet her gaze. The woman nodded toward a bus. Ijibuode. Small enough to disappear in, big enough to find work. She helped Sade purchase the ticket, even sharing her breakfast of bread and akara. This simple kindness from a stranger nearly broke Sade's composure. No one in her father's circle would have done the same. Ijibuode was indeed another world. The modest town, with its tin-roofed buildings and dusty streets, bore no resemblance to Victoria Island's manicured elegance. Sade rented a single room with a shared bathroom, accommodations that would have horrified her former self. The mattress was thin, the walls needed paint, and at night, she could hear her neighbors' conversations through the thin walls. Yet there was a strange comfort in the anonymity, in being just another face in the crowd. Reality hit hard when her money began to dwindle. Sade had never worked a day in her life. Her education at elite schools hadn't prepared her for the practicalities of earning a living. She tried tutoring English but found few takers. Eventually, desperation led her to a small restaurant where she washed dishes until her soft hands cracked and bled. Later, she learned to serve customers, memorizing orders and balancing plates with growing confidence. Each day was exhausting, yet she found unexpected dignity in earning her own way. 6 weeks after her arrival, morning sickness confirmed what she had begun to suspect. Alone in her room, Sade placed her hand on her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face. The child within her was both miracle and burden, Kunle's legacy and a responsibility she wasn't sure she could bear alone. She whispered promises to the baby, vowing that despite everything, this child would be loved. As her pregnancy progressed, Sade's body changed while her circumstances deteriorated. The restaurant owner kept her on but reduced her hours when customers began to whisper about the unwed pregnant woman. Her meager savings couldn't cover both rent and proper nutrition. She chose the roof over her head and survived on one meal a day, supplemented by fruit when she could afford it. By her second trimester, Sade's naturally slender frame had become gaunt except for her growing belly. Dark circles permanently ringed her eyes, and climbing the stairs to her room left her breathless. Still, she refused to contact her father. Each day of independence, however difficult, was a victory over the life that had been prescribed for her. It was a typical market day when her body finally betrayed her. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with humidity before the afternoon rain. Sade had ventured to the market to buy beans and palm oil, carefully counting her remaining naira. As she haggled with a vendor, the world began to tilt. Sounds became distant, faces blurred. She felt herself falling, the ground rising to meet her. Her last conscious thought was of her baby, who would protect this child if she couldn't. Unconscious bodies tell stories that pride cannot hide. As Sade collapsed onto the dusty market ground, a crowd gathered around her frail form. Among them was a woman who recognized her distinctive features, the high cheekbones and proud posture even in weakness, as the hallmarks of the powerful Adebayo family. The woman had worked as a house help in Lagos years before, serving at one of Adebayo's lavish business dinners. Now, she watched as strangers carried the unconscious girl to the local clinic's single-worn cot. "Find someone who knows her," the nurse instructed after stabilizing Sade with the limited resources available. "A pregnant woman in this condition needs family." The former house help hesitated. Should she speak? The Adebayos were not people one crossed lightly. Yet the girl looked on death's doorstep, her cheeks hollow, her breathing shallow. Finally, conscience won over fear. "I know her father," she said quietly. "He is looking for her." Within hours, a call was placed to a business associate who knew an official who could reach Adebayo. The message passed through many hands before reaching Lagos. "Your daughter has been found in Ijebu. She is with child and gravely ill." Adebayo's world stopped. For months, his investigators had followed false leads across Nigeria. After Sade's disappearance, he had maintained the fiction that she was studying abroad, keeping her absence from becoming gossip at the parties he still dutifully attended. He canceled meetings and boarded his personal vehicle immediately, refusing even his usual security detail. The journey that should have taken 3 hours stretched to 5 as unseasonable rain washed out sections of the rural roads. When he finally arrived at the clinic, mud-splattered and unrecognizable as the polished businessman of Lagos, he was directed to a back room where a single fan rotated ineffectively against the heat. There lay his daughter, but not the vibrant, defiant young woman who had stood before him at that last dinner. This Sade was skeletal, her once glowing skin ashen, her only fullness the round belly that housed his grandchild. And 4 drip-fed precious fluids into her arm. When her eyes fluttered open and focused on him, there was no joy in their recognition, no relief at being found. Only a dull accusation. "Why are you here?" Her voice was a whisper. "To bring you home," he said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away weakly. "I have no home." "Sade, please. You need medical care. Real doctors, not," he gestured around the sparse clinic. "Did my honor mean so little to you?" The question hung between them like a knife. "That you would rather see me dead than with someone beneath our station?" His carefully constructed justifications crumbled. Standing before him was the price of his pride, his child, wasting away, carrying his grandchild, both lives hanging by a thread because of choices he had made. That evening, he carried her to his vehicle despite her weak protests. By nightfall, she was in Lagos' finest private hospital, surrounded by specialists. Adebayo moved mechanically through the motions, ordering the best care, preparing her old room, instructing the staff. But inside, something had broken. As Sade slowly regained strength over the following days, Adebayo found himself plagued by one persistent thought: where was the boy? Kunle's disappearance had served its purpose, separating him from Sade, but now the question haunted him. He had instructed his head of security, Musa, to handle the situation but had deliberately avoided asking for details. Find out what happened to the boy, he instructed Musa 3 weeks after bringing Sade home. I want to know everything. Musa's reluctance was visible. Sir, with respect, we resolved that matter as you instructed. I instructed you to keep him away from my daughter. Not to, he couldn't finish the sentence. The investigation revealed a truth far worse than Adebayo had imagined. His men had intercepted Kunle that night, believing they understood their employer's unspoken wishes. They hadn't just threatened the young artist or paid him off. They had taken him to an abandoned warehouse where things had gone too far. A body had been disposed of in the murky waters beyond the port. Adebayo sat alone in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey before him, as the horror of it settled in his bones. He had never ordered a murder, had never contemplated such a thing, yet his authority, his power, his casual disregard for a young man's humanity had set these events in motion as surely as if he had tied the concrete block himself. How could he tell Sade? The daughter who looked at him with eyes dead of emotion, who mechanically ate the food placed before her only for the child's sake, who spoke only when necessary in a house that had once echoed with her laughter. The bitter truth clung to him like a second skin as he walked the corridors of his mansion. He had destroyed what he claimed to protect. His family name, his legacy, his honor, all meaningless now against the weight of an innocent man's life and his daughter's broken spirit. And so, the greatest tragedy here isn't just a love story cut short. It's how Adebayo's relentless pursuit of social standing ultimately destroyed the very legacy he thought he was protecting. In his quest to maintain family honor, he shattered his daughter's trust and stained his own conscience with blood he never intended to spill. This tale serves as a mirror to our own lives, where we sometimes place traditions and expectations above the happiness of those we claim to cherish. When status becomes more important than love, we risk losing both. True love, as Sade and Kunle demonstrated, isn't measured by wealth or connections, but by the courage to stand firm against opposing forces, even when those forces are our own flesh and blood.